This is what dismissive avoidant texts when they don't care. Have you ever stared at a message and wondered why it feels so cold, despite looking completely normal? Sometimes a few words reveal far more than a long emotional conversation ever could about someone's true intentions. When a dismissive avoidant emotionally checks out, their texting style often changes before their actions become obvious. The warmth disappears first, then curiosity fades, and eventually communication starts feeling strangely forced and distant. That does not automatically mean they are cruel, heartless, or intentionally trying to hurt someone every time. People with dismissive avoidant tendencies often protect themselves by creating emotional distance whenever relationships feel overwhelming. Still, when they genuinely stop caring about the connection, their messages begin following predictable emotional patterns. Understanding these patterns helps you protect your peace instead of endlessly decoding every single text. Today we will explore the messages dismissive avoidants commonly send when their emotional investment has faded over time. By the end of this video, you may finally understand what their words are truly communicating beneath the surface. The first sign appears when every conversation suddenly becomes painfully short without any real explanation. You might write an entire paragraph, yet they answer with only one or two words before disappearing again. Replies like okay, sure, fine, or whatever become the entire conversation despite your genuine effort. The issue is rarely the short message itself, because everyone sends brief texts from time to time. The real concern appears when emotional engagement completely disappears regardless of the topic you discuss. There are no follow-up questions, no curiosity, and no interest in continuing the conversation. It feels less like talking with someone who loves you and more like texting a distant acquaintance. Healthy relationships involve emotional participation instead of communication that feels empty and mechanical every day. Another common pattern appears when they stop asking about your life, emotions, or important experiences altogether. You tell them something exciting, but they simply reply with nice before ending the conversation. You share something painful, and their response feels polite rather than emotionally supportive or comforting. When someone genuinely cares, they naturally want to understand what you are feeling beneath your words. Curiosity is one of the strongest signs that emotional connection is still alive inside a relationship. When curiosity completely disappears, emotional investment has often started disappearing alongside it. Another revealing message is when they constantly answer with delayed responses without acknowledging the growing distance. Hours become days, and days slowly become an accepted pattern instead of an unusual exception. Everyone gets busy sometimes, but consistently ignoring someone sends a message beyond scheduling conflicts. The silence itself becomes a form of communication even when no difficult conversation takes place. Eventually, you begin expecting disappointment instead of eagerly waiting for meaningful interactions again. That emotional uncertainty slowly drains confidence from even the strongest and most patient partner. Dismissive avoidants who no longer care may also stop explaining their absence because they feel no obligation. Instead of saying they were overwhelmed, they return acting as though nothing unusual ever happened. This creates confusion because your emotional experience is ignored, while their comfort remains the priority. Another pattern involves canceling plans through emotionless texts without showing concern about disappointing you. Messages like "can't make it" or "maybe another time" become frustratingly common without real explanations. They rarely suggest another day because rebuilding the connection no longer feels emotionally important. Actions often reveal emotional priorities much more clearly than carefully chosen words ever can. Someone who values the relationship usually searches for another opportunity instead of quietly letting everything fade. Watch carefully for messages that shift every responsibility back onto you, regardless of the situation. They might text, "do whatever you want," whenever emotional discussions become uncomfortable. At first, this sounds like freedom, but it often reflects emotional withdrawal rather than respectful independence. Healthy independence encourages connection while respecting space, instead of abandoning difficult conversations. Dismissive avoidance becomes harmful when distance replaces communication instead of supporting emotional balance. Another major clue appears when appreciation completely disappears from everyday conversations with you. Simple thank you messages become rare, even after thoughtful gestures or meaningful acts of kindness. Gratitude reflects emotional awareness because caring people naturally acknowledge another person's effort. When appreciation consistently disappears, emotional detachment may already be much deeper than it appears. Notice whether compliments also vanish without being replaced by emotional reassurance. Feeling unseen for weeks or months slowly changes how safe and valued someone feels. Another revealing text says, "I'm just busy," every time deeper conversations are introduced. Being busy is completely normal because everyone experiences demanding schedules during life. However, constant busyness without emotional effort often becomes a shield against meaningful connection. Real interest usually finds small moments because priorities influence consistent communication habits. A caring partner may have limited time, yet they still create emotional reassurance whenever possible. Dismissive avoidants who no longer care rarely recognize how repeated emotional neglect affects their partner. Some messages become surprisingly polite while feeling emotionally colder than direct disagreements. Everything sounds respectful, yet nothing feels genuinely warm, personal, or emotionally connected anymore. The relationship slowly transforms into polite coexistence instead of a loving emotional partnership. That emotional emptiness often hurts more than temporary conflict because it feels invisible. You cannot solve problems that another person refuses to emotionally acknowledge or discuss. Another warning sign appears when they stop sharing anything meaningful about their own experiences. Every conversation remains focused on logistics instead of dreams, struggles, or future possibilities together. Emotional intimacy cannot survive when vulnerability disappears from only one side of the relationship. Strong relationships require mutual openness rather than one person carrying every emotional conversation. Notice whether they avoid discussing the future whenever you mention shared plans. Replies become uncertain, distant, or intentionally vague despite earlier excitement about building something together. That shift often reflects emotional withdrawal long before an official breakup conversation happens. Many people mistake these texts as temporary stress when they actually reveal changing emotional priorities. This does not mean every dismissive avoidant follows exactly the same communication style. People are complex, and attachment patterns exist across a wide range of emotional experiences. Some dismissive avoidants recognize these habits and actively work toward becoming healthier partners. Growth becomes possible whenever someone accepts responsibility instead of denying emotional patterns. The important question is not whether someone has avoidant attachment, but whether they value improving the relationship. Effort always speaks louder than promises, because consistency builds trust better than occasional reassurance. If someone repeatedly shows emotional distance without accountability, believe the overall pattern. Do not lose yourself trying to earn affection from someone unwilling to emotionally participate. Love should never require constant guessing, chasing, or proving your worth through exhaustion. The healthiest relationships create emotional safety instead of leaving one partner trapped in uncertainty. Remember that your feelings deserve respect even when someone struggles with vulnerability. Understanding dismissive avoidant behavior gives you clarity, but it should never excuse neglect. Choose relationships where communication creates peace instead of anxiety over every unanswered message. Because real love is measured by consistent care, presence, and emotional responsibility.